In truth, mixed martial artists are, or at least can be, terrifying individuals. After all, most professional fighters spend countless hours in the gym learning the best way to render an individual unconscious, or choke them into submission. That said, even in an occupation that almost exclusively features scary folks, there are still some who stand out amongst their peers. So for this video, we've decided to take a look at some of the most fearsome and intimidating fighters we've ever seen inside the octagon. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 of the most intimidating fighters in UFC history. Number 10. Quinton Rampage Jackson. Intimidation has long been a part of former UFC light heavyweight champion Quinton Rampage Jackson's game. From the 8-pound chain he wears around his neck to his signature howl, Rampage comes across as a man one would not want to trifle with. Moreover, the no-nonsense scowl that Rampage often sports before his fights helps give opponents a glimpse of the sort of intensity that they can expect inside the cage. Even light heavyweight champion Jon Jones, who is usually as confident as they come, admitted that he felt intimidated by the former champ prior to their fight at UFC 135. Unfortunately, for those who step into the cage with him, Jackson is every bit as dangerous as his persona would suggest. Between devastating hooks and his signature power slams, the former Pride legend has one of the most impressive highlight reels in the sport. And even at 42, Rampage Jackson is still a scary individual who continues to add to his legacy. Number 9. Wanderlei Silva. Brazil's own Wanderlei Silva has earned a reputation as one of the most violent combat sports athletes around. Over the course of his career, the fearsome Brazilian has proven to be every bit as terrifying as his nickname the Axe Murderer would suggest. An offense-orientated Muay Thai specialist, Silva attacks his opponents with the ferocity of a feral tiger. His brutal fighting style has allowed him to accumulate wins over more than a few MMA legends, and has made him one of the most feared fighters in UFC history. Over the years, Silva has shown his willingness to throw down at a moment's notice, as put on display during his impromptu scrap with his rival Chael Sonnen on the set of The Ultimate Fighter Brazil. So given his body of work, the Axe Murderer has earned his rightful place among the sport's most terrifying competitors. Number 8. Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is a physical specimen who is every bit as ferocious as he looks. The muscle-bound heavyweight is quite literally the hardest hitter in the entire UFC roster. Studies have shown that being on the receiving end of a clean shot by Ngannou is roughly the equivalent of being hit by a Ford Escort moving at top speed. Moreover, based on measurements, the force behind his shots has been compared to a grown adult swinging a sledgehammer overhead. Simply put, if Ngannou is throwing a punch in your direction, there's a really good chance that you're going to sleep. His ability to put opponents away in an instant has quickly become the stuff of MMA lore, with the former title challenger's last 4 opponents all being victims of the kind of first-round knockout that would have most men considering other professions. In a list chock full of terrifying fighters, one could make a very strong argument that Francis the Predator Ngannou is the scariest of them all. Number 7. Cris Cyborg. While Amanda Nunes might be the greatest female fighter alive today, there was one point in time where Cris Cyborg held that mantle. In fact, prior to losing to the Lioness, she had been one of the most feared female fighters in the world for roughly 15 years and counting. During that stretch, she had won 20 pro fights and finished all but 3 of her opponents by knockout. And as the nickname would suggest, Cyborg is like an unstoppable machine when she steps inside the cage, and has laid waste to many opponents. The former UFC Women's Featherweight Champion has used her relentless striking to defeat present stars like Holly Holm, Felicia Spencer and Julia Budd. Her combination of tenacity, relentlessness and aggression, along with her imposing physical appearance, has bound together to make Cyborg precisely the type of competitor that fighters generally go out of their way to avoid. Number 6. Brock Lesnar. There are certain human beings who look like they were born to be a combat sports athlete, and former NCAA Division I wrestler Brock Lesnar is definitely one of those people. The famed heavyweight champion is so massive that the UFC actually had to make custom gloves just to fit his hands. And as if that wasn't scary enough, the massive knife tattoo on his chest is likely to instill a degree of fear into anyone he faces. Lesnar's size, skill and uncanny charisma help make him one of the top draws in MMA history. There's no denying that the current WWE superstar is a freak of an athlete who moves incredibly well for such a massive individual. Though his MMA career was rather brief, he did manage to defeat legends like Randy Couture and Frank Mir on his way to capturing UFC gold. As one of the most physically imposing figures the world of MMA has ever seen, there's no doubting that Lesnar is an incredibly intimidating individual. Number 5. Chuck Liddell. The Iceman Chuck Liddell is by all counts a gentleman outside the octagon. That said, when the cage doors shut, there aren't many fighters who wanted the Iceman staring in their direction. With his trademark mohawk and his hands of steel, Liddell was one of the sport's scariest and most revered strikers. In his prime, Liddell could put an opponent to sleep at a moment's notice. And that power made him one of the most successful champions of his era, with the former light heavyweight king KOing some of the best in the game, including megastars like Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz and Alistair Overeem. Liddell was known as the Iceman due to his calm temperament, but also the fact that he had a reputation for knocking his opponents out cold. Number 4. Anthony Johnson. If someone was ever to create a museum dedicated to knockout artists, then Anthony Rumble Johnson would definitely deserve a prominent exhibit. Johnson may have been a wrestler by trade, but by the time his career was all said and done, he had become one of the scariest strikers in the sport. To put it simply, he's the Francis Ngannou of the light heavyweight division. One of the things that made Johnson so terrifying was the caliber of opponent he would put away with relative ease. The NCAA wrestling standout has finished megastars like Ryan Bader, Glover Teixeira and Alexander Gustafsson. Although he's come up short on his quest for UFC gold, he did manage to send Daniel Cormier flying across the ring during their first title fight in 2015. Fighters knew that when they signed on the dotted line to face Rumble Johnson, a concussion was a definite possibility. Number 3. Robbie Lawler. Most of the athletes featured on our list are larger competitors, who have a physically imposing appearance. While ruthless Robbie Lawler doesn't fit the previous description, he is every bit as terrifying as the other fighters mentioned, albeit for a very different reason. Lawler may not be 6'3" and weigh 265 pounds, but his ability to absorb and dish out punishment for 5 rounds makes him the sort of fighter that takes years off an opponent's career. The former welterweight title holder is known for being involved in some of the most memorable 5-round battles ever to take place inside the octagon. Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit and Matt Brown are all stars whose careers have declined significantly after going 5 rounds with Lawler. And although he may not be famous for putting his opponents away in the first round, he still delivers the kind of beating that changes a man, and not for the better. Number 2. Yoel Romero. The soldier of God Yoel Romero is a powerhouse out of Cuba, who won a silver medal at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney. Though he is now well into his 40s, the former multi-time UFC title challenger is still a remarkable physical specimen. Moreover, as we saw in his recent dance-off with Israel Adesanya, Romero is also an incredible athlete. Perhaps the scariest thing about the former Olympian is that he hits as hard as his appearance would suggest. Moreover, he also has world-class wrestling in his back pocket should he decide he needs to use it. Those who still aren't convinced as to just how terrifying this man is should go back and watch his highlight reel knockouts over some of the sport's biggest names. Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman and Lyoto Machida are all among the stars who have had the misfortune of experiencing his power firsthand. So even at 43, Romero is still arguably the scariest man in the middleweight division. Number 1. Vitor Belfort. As a legendary fighter whose career has spanned over 2 decades, Vitor the Phenom Belfort was an absolute terror in his prime. Sure, like many of the fighters previously mentioned, the Brazilian sported an impressive physique in his heyday, due in no small part to TRT. That said, it was his well-rounded game and knockout power that made Belfort a nightmare matchup for most opponents. As Joe Rogan put best, the TRT Vitor Belfort was a force of science.
Right, when he knocked out Luke Rockhold, when he up Michael Bisping, dude, when he knocked out Dan Henderson the first round, he was a goddamn force of science.
Maybe the best example of just how scary the former UFC light heavyweight champion can be was highlighted in 2013 during his bout with Luke Rockhold. During the contest, Belfort landed a brutal head kick that would go on to earn him Knockout of the Year honours. Of course, Rockhold was one of only several UFC stars that fell victim of a vicious knockout courtesy of Vitor Belfort. Michael Bisping, who was KO'd by Belfort in 2013, suffered a devastating kick to the head, one that detached his retina and left him permanently disfigured. In total, the Phenom had 14 finishes during his UFC tenure, with 12 of those coming by way of knockout. So overall, we'd say he was a pretty intimidating fighter. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.